This is the 200th win for Andretti Autosport, so what better way to do it here in Long Beach, here in California?
Bunch of hungry, angry cars behind me. I got them. Little do they know I'm angrier.
This Andretti Autosport team, and it's unbelievable.
Ladies and gentlemen, the winner of the 100th running of the Indianapolis 500, Alexander Rossi.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kyle Kinard, Senior Editor at Road and Track Magazine. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 8 of Inside Track. We're excited to welcome a very special guest for you guys for this episode. He is a native Californian, a father of 2 adorable dogs, a bourbon connoisseur, and an all-around great guy. But you'll probably know him better as IndyCar driver with Andretti Autosport and Honda. Alexander Rossi, welcome to Inside Track.
Thank you. I was a little concerned there when you said father of 2 things. But yes, I have 2 dogs. They're great. And yeah, man, thank you. I'm happy to be here. Sorry that we had some technical difficulties and we're a bit behind.
Well, you know, it happens, man. And but I did want to get into that because just before this interview, you were flying in an airplane, but you were flying the airplane. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I've always been looking for like a hobby to do in the off season. I tried to learn how to play guitar, and I figured that flying airplanes was actually going to be easier. So I started the process in late October, early November, and loved it. It's a great hobby to have. It's a great skill to learn. I think I don't have any plans on really becoming a professional pilot, obviously, but you know, definitely to fill the time in the off season waiting to get back into a race car. It's a motorized vehicle of sorts, so it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So does that push any of the same buttons for you that like the racing does, where it's kind of man and machine, or is it a little bit more relaxing because it's not as hectic?
A little bit. I mean, it can be hectic, you know, if you don't do your job right. But yeah, ultimately, it's learning everything that goes into aviation. You know, the flying of the airplane is probably one of the easier parts and the quickest things to learn. But everything else that goes along with it is very complex for good reason, and takes a lot of time to kind of get your head around. But like I said, I've enjoyed every minute of it, and we'll keep at it until the season starts in the NCT IndyCar Series in March.
Well, good luck with that, man. That sounds real fun. So, you know, because we're road and track, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about the road. We heard that you have an interesting garage and a pretty good one. Headlining the effort, we've got a Honda Passport, and then of course the Ford Raptor, and then we heard you just picked up an Audi RS6. Can you tell us a little bit about the RS6 Avant?
So RSQ8 actually, so kind of the same, but just more dog friendly. It's awesome, man. It was one of those kind of impulse purchases in a roundabout way, but ultimately, you know, the time with the truck was coming to an end, and wanted to move on to something a little bit quieter. And let's see, I took the truck off road once. Ultimately, it was a Starbucks grocery getter. So someone in Hawaii was really excited about buying it. So that worked for me, and it's all good. I have to say, though, I do love kind of big trucks. Growing up in Northern California, my first car was a pickup truck. So I think I'll always have one. I'm looking to maybe that electric Hummer that's coming out here in a little bit. We'll see what the availability is like on that. But I love cars. I've been very fortunate to kind of always have a manufactured car. So I don't think a car collection is in my future, but 1 or 2 I think is a good thing to have.
Yeah, it's funny because it seems like every time I talk to a racer, you know, I'm expecting that they're going to be the guys with the Ferraris and the like supercars. And it seems like most of them are like SUV kind of guys. You know, they have trucks. Why is there that disconnect there? Is it that like you're already driving the most exciting thing on four wheels, and you don't really need to get that from the daily driver?
Kind of, I think. I've been fortunate enough to drive some amazing cars, supercars, from like your NSXs to Nissan GTR 458, Aventadors, whatever, 911s, and they're awesome machines. And I would love to have one, but like at the same time, I can't justify like that sum of money when ultimately the performance that I'm getting out of it is still substantially less than what I get to do kind of every couple of weeks. So it's a very fortunate kind of position to be in, to not need to have a supercar to get my speed and adrenaline and G-force and acceleration fix. But yeah, I mean, maybe one day, but I'm just not in a place in my life where I really need a supercar. So.
Well, and I think the bigger problem there is that you can only fit one dog at a time in an NSX, right?
That is very true. And also, like, there was a period of time where I got quite a few speeding tickets. So that's when I bought the truck, and I haven't gotten a ticket in almost 4 years now. So we're looking up, but I don't want to go down that road again.
That's a good plan. So just switching gears now to talk a little bit more about racing. I mean, obviously, for myself as an American racing fan, I'm really interested in the period that you had in Formula One as kind of the great American hope during that period. And while you were there, we even did a piece with you. I remember at the time I wasn't working at the magazine, but I think we were at Road America, and you were driving one of the old Lotuses. And we kind of had that conversation in the magazine. But I was really interested to get an insider's perspective from you. How hard is it ultimately to cross the pond as a young American and get a foothold into that world when you're an outsider kind of from day one?
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. To get to Formula One, you have to come up through the European kind of junior formula. You're not going to get there from kind of racing in the States through, let's use, for example, the Road to Indy series. It's a great feeder series for IndyCar, but you can be a champion in every step of that ladder series, and a European F1 team is not even going to give it 30 seconds to look at. So you got to go over there. You have to immerse yourself in the culture. You almost have to become one of them and prove yourself and prove that you're committed to racing in Europe and kind of being European in a roundabout way. So for me, I was fortunate enough to be an only child, and my dad had just as big of a passion for Formula One as I did. So when I said at an age of 12, when I started in go-karts, that I wanted to race in Formula One, it was like, okay. And he kind of figured out how we were going to do that. And it wasn't without the help of my entire family, mom, dad, grandma even, and then a group of almost 100 investors, actually, that kind of came on board with us from kind of the year 2008 all the way through 2013-ish. Who became kind of part of our journey and our family. And it allowed me to have the budget to race over there, to live over there. And I was fortunate enough to finally make my F1 debut in 2015. And it was awesome. I mean, to be able to do it at Circuit of the Americas, meaning be able to race there as an American, be the first American to race in F1 at that track. I mean, there was a lot of very, very special things about that 5-race period that I had in F1. Ultimately, it didn't pan out to have the full season deal like we thought we were going to have in 2016, but I can't really complain about it too much, because it allowed me to come race in the States for Andretti Autosport, and I think things have been going pretty well over here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they are. Do you think there's a way to kind of improve that pipeline? Because I think you were successful in those junior formula, even I think before you kind of made that leap as like a 16-year-old. Is there a better way for future American talent to make it over there, or are we just kind of stuck with the system we've got right now?
The way I explain it to people is, there's 20 to 22 F1 seats, right? And if you have 400 Europeans that are trying to climb the ladder system, 200 Europeans that are trying to climb the ladder system and get to Formula One, and you have 2 Americans, right? It's not that the American kids aren't capable and they might not be able to do as good or even better of a job as the other 200 Europeans, but like the sample size is so small, the odds that one of those guys is going to, get the nod to be in one of those seats is pretty slim to none. So we just need more Americans to kind of understand the path, I think, to get over there. But also at the same time, like there's a huge commitment to ask of families, of a 14 or 15-year-old that wants to go race in Europe to kind of uproot their entire lives to kind of go allow that kid to chase their dreams. So again, I was in a very lucky situation. I think Red Bull for a huge period of time had the Red Bull American F1 driver search, and it got Scott Speed all the way to Formula One, and that was a huge success story from that program. So it's going to take something kind of similar to that, a huge corporation that has a desire to see American talent in F1 and then kind of back them all the way, which is no small check to write. So I mean, it's a big hurdle to overcome for sure.
Sure. Well, I'm kind of glad you brought up the Red Bull program because you're one of the few Americans that really has firsthand insight into how that world of politic and contract negotiations and intrigue in Formula One actually works. And we ran a piece a little while ago that talked about how that Red Bull program had ultimately burned more drivers than it elevated. How do you explain how drivers approach contracts, how they're weighing, their payday versus their opportunity, whether they're, just trying to grasp at whatever, rung of the ladder that they can get? I mean, how on the ground are you looking at that one chance you get in Formula One and judging which contracts you should or shouldn't take?
That's a complex question for sure, and I'll try and answer all of it. So the first thing is Red Bull is a very, well, Formula One in general is a very cutthroat industry. It's run more of a business in my mind than really a sport, and a lot of that's due to the fact that these manufacturers are spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year to go have race cars drive around the racetrack. So in a lot of ways, if I was running a Formula One team, I would probably approach it the same way. But for the drivers, it becomes very difficult because you lose that kind of connection that you have with your race team all the way through your career. It's kind of like a small family that you have. And then you get to Formula One and your teammate's kind of your worst enemy. And some of the staff, is happy that you're there. And some of the staff would prefer driver X to be in your seat. So like you're always trying to kind of play the game in terms of politics and appeasing certain people and not appeasing other people, and also trying to keep as much to yourself as possible because of the way that there's such a discrepancy between teams in terms of performance. You're only judged against your teammate. So in terms of everything that you're doing, there's one guy you have to beat, and it creates a competitive environment within the team. So you've got the guys on one car that are trying to help that driver beat the other driver and the other guys on that opposite car, and it's not a unified kind of effort. And you see that in Formula One all the time, and Red Bull's a perfect example. Does Max Verstappen kind of deserve the number one driver role and the favoritism that he gets? Yes, he does. But that still doesn't mean it's not very, very difficult and a little bit unfair to every driver that tries to go up against him because the cards are stacked against them kind of from day one. Mm-hmm. So in terms of what you're looking for as a driver trying to break through into Formula One, you're just looking for a deal, first of all. You don't care what it is, who it's with. If you're paid any money at all, you just want to race in Formula One. And then from there, it's really how do you position yourself either through results or through relationships that you're building ahead of your teammate. And you'll really kind of, nothing's off limits in a lot of ways to posture yourself to maybe have a team in the midfield, look at you And then from there, once you kind of get your midfield opportunity, you're kind of regarded as at least a staple in Formula One for a couple of years, and you can start to play the game in terms of negotiating a contract. But really, for the first, until you're at a Renault or a McLaren or a Racing Point, you can't really play that game. If you're driving for Williams or Sauber, it's really, if they offer you anything, you take it, and you just try and do the best job you can.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic insight. Thank you. So just switching now, we're kind of moving chronologically. So obviously in 2016, you made then that jump over to IndyCar to great success. I should say you were rookie over the year. I think you finished 11th in the standings, and then of course there was the 500 victory. Did that feel like validating to you after working so hard in Formula One and getting that kind of sliver of sunlight? Was that just like the ultimate kind of feeling?
Yes, and there was a lot of emotions on that day, but the one that kind of correlates to what you're saying is I remember kind of the car getting pushed into the winner's circle, and the whole team's there and all the media and everything. But I saw my dad, and I made eye contact with my dad. And for us to kind of abandon the European dream like we did kind of last minute in February of 2016 and come to race in IndyCar on a 1-year deal with Andretti Autosport, like it was a big risk for myself. It was a huge risk for Andretti, for Brian Herta Autosport, who was a co-owner of that car at the time. So it was a big risk for everyone involved, and there was a lot of apprehension about it because, from the time that I signed the deal to the time that I was testing my first IndyCar was like a 12-day period. And then from the time that I finished my first day of testing to racing, it was like another 10 to 15 days. So everything happened really, really quickly. And the Indy 500 was my first race on a super speedway. So there was really no expectations going into it. It was just trying to finish the 500 miles. And, we had been pretty good for a rookie, I think, that year. We qualified 11th. We were kind of always in and around the top 7 on the practice days. So I thought we were doing a good job. I had no anticipation or expectation of winning that race. So when it all happened, there was this kind of moment where it was like, this was kind of all meant to happen, and all of this fell into place for a reason that was kind of bigger than our wildest dreams. So that moment with my dad, which is this picture that we're looking at, he's in the white shirt, was really, really special, and one that I'll remember forever.
That's awesome. I mean, it seems like kind of any racer you interview, whether it's Lewis Hamilton or Jenson Button, and now Verstappen, they seem to have these really close relationships with their fathers. What is it about that journey in racing from so young through the successes that brings father and son so close?
Well, ultimately they're the one paying for it in the beginning, right? So they have a vested interest kind of in the early stages, just financially. And then, when you're a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, like you can't go to the go-kart track yourself. You can't work on your own go-kart. You're learning all these little things, but you're a young person at this point. So who's taking the brunt of that workload? And it's the dads. And so through that kind of 4, 5, sometimes 10-year, depending on when you start in go-karts, transition to being a teenager / young adult, it's your dad has as much effort and work into you becoming a race car driver as you do, if not more. Yeah. So, for them, when, you kind of now know the responsibility and appreciate the effort and what it takes and are willing to work at it, off track as hard as you work at it on track, then kind of the pendulum swings a little bit to kind of being your career. But it's a huge joint effort in the beginning. So when you're able to have success kind of at the professional level, it's really two people's dreams. It's your dream as a kid because you want to be a race car driver. and it's the father's dream to help the kid kind of achieve his dream. So it's a very kind of a special relationship that you form with them, not only as your dad, but also kind of your number one fan, mechanic, driver, coach, and in some cases manager. So my dad's actually my manager, and has been ever since day one, and kind of helped me navigate the entire European crossroads that we discussed before, and then kind of helped me, get back to the States and establish myself here. But that whole investor kind of relationship that I talked about earlier, that was all a program that was developed by my father, who was a landscape contractor at trade. So really had no racing background whatsoever. So yeah, it's a very cool thing for a father and son to be able to go do.
That's great, man. Yeah. I love to hear about that. So just moving forward even a little bit further, one thing that I've really enjoyed about kind of watching your career is this versatility, right? You were in Formula One, you made it back over to Indy. And then in 2018, in the span of 3 weeks, you ran the IndyCar finale, you ran at Bathurst, and then you did the Baja 1000. It used to be that versatility was the way you proved you were the guy at the top of the pyramid, right? Like all the guys in the 50s, 60s were trying to run, Le Mans as you've done. Then they were filling in the calendar with Formula One and Indy and just bouncing back and forth between these disciplines. Why don't we see more of that? And what draws you to those, different disciplines in particular?
Well, I think you don't see more of it because manufacturers are so kind of protective over their drivers and kind of the equipment that they're in. And then also the teams are really quite concerned about, just your own health and safety, because if you get hurt before the season, like that affects them as well. Where I was very fortunate to be able to kind of do all of these things is, we'll talk about Baja. So Baja Honda has an off-road team. So I already have a very close relationship with Honda and HPD in California, and was able to kind of, drop hints for a couple of years that, I'd love to do it. Like, it looked awesome. The truck looks amazing. I know nothing about off-road racing, but I know what the Baja 1000 is. So if there's ever an opportunity, let me know. And it kind of just that relationship developed, and it kind of came to be that way. And then in terms of the V8 supercar, there's no Honda connection, but Michael Andretti is a partner in Walkinshaw Andretti United, which is a V8 supercar team. So when the supercar team was looking at running a wild card entry, it made sense for Michael to use his IndyCar drivers because there was cross promotion for him there. So I didn't have to convince my boss to let me go do that, because he was the one that wanted me to do that. And obviously, I'm not going to say no to racing the Bathurst 1000. Now that I've done it once, I might say no to it, considering we didn't do very well. But it's just I've been fortunate to kind of be in that position. And then finally, with the Acura DPI program for 2 years, it was with Team Penske. And my relationship with Honda allowed me to go do that for the endurance races, and that will continue this year, albeit with a different team. But so it's kind of two Honda connections with the Acura DPI program and the Ridgeline off-road team, and then the V8s came from my team owner. So pretty cool the way it all worked out. I will definitely be competing in the IMSA endurance races this year. Daytona's just around the corner, end of the month. And then I have every full intention of doing the 1000, the Baja 1000 this year, assuming that schedules don't get jumbled up with the state of the world that we live in right now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, through Formula One, Indy, if you're running DPI, those things are all 4 wheels on asphalt, and then you transition to Baja, which is obviously on dirt, and you're essentially riding a missile through the desert for hours a day. I mean, was that the most jarring transition ever, or does it still just feel like I am race car driver, put me in thing and I go fast?
I think both. So I think the biggest thing to overcome was my very first day that I tested the truck in Southern California. Before I drove it, the team owner and the lead driver, Jeff Proctor, kind of was in the driver's seat and he put me in the passenger seat. And he was like, I just want you to sit here to feel the capability of the truck. And for that entire 25-minute ride, I was terrified. I did not, my brain could not understand how what was happening was possible. And I never like clenched, like held on to something so tightly before, until I think I flew an airplane for the first time. But anyway, so that was a wild kind of barrier to break just mentally with just learning the capability of the truck. But once you kind of understand what it can do and it can and know its limitations, it really becomes about driving a vehicle. And I mean, ultimately it's four wheels and there's a lot of the same technique as driving a race car. But the big thing about Baja is being able to see terrain and then understand how hard you can push through certain terrain. So the best guys are able to see a certain type of rock and a certain grade with certain kind of G outs that are placed throughout a 4 or 5 mile segment. And they can know, okay, I can have an average speed of 50 miles an hour through here. You know, other guys would think they could go 65 and they break their truck. Other guys go 30 and they lose 2 or 3 minutes, right? So it's being able to have the vision and understanding of what's coming up and being able to kind of predict what the truck can do is really where desert racing takes a whole new different skill set and one that I'm still learning. But I love it. It's some of the most fun I've ever had behind the wheel of a vehicle, and I definitely missed doing it this past year.
Well, if you're a Northern California truck man, that's right up your alley.
Exactly.
Just switching back now, kind of moving forward. 2019 was another pretty banner year for you. Successful. You won at Long Beach, Road America. You ended up third. But if I may go back to one moment in the Indy 500, it was a tough race for you that year. Obviously, you finished second. But I think the way that you clawed back from that pit stop that slowed you way down and made your way up through the field gained you kind of this new level of enthusiasm with the fans. Whereas in 2016, when you had just come over the pond back again, it was almost like you were, a European racer, even though you're obviously an American. I mean, how do you understand this kind of this like transition in the consciousness of the fans between when you first got into Indy and had that win versus, even though you didn't finish first, it kind of grew into this whole new fandom, it seemed like, for you in 2019?
So you're absolutely right. I don't really know that I can explain how that happened, because every race, I'm just trying to go out there and win in whatever capacity possible, and the fan reaction is nowhere kind of on your radar in terms of a motivating factor. For what I've understood now, and I give a lot of the fans that weren't happy about me winning in 2016 kind of the benefit of the doubt, was when I won, for sure I didn't understand it. I didn't understand the magnitude of what had happened. But that wasn't because I thought the race was dumb. That wasn't because I wasn't excited to be racing an IndyCar. It was purely because I had never even attended an Indy 500 before. This was the first one that I had attended, was the one I was racing in, and just so happened to win. So it was impossible for me to really grasp what that race meant until kind of for the entire next year. So once you win the 500, you're kind of the face of the race for 12 months until it happens again, kind of promoting it. So it wasn't until kind of I went through that process and met a lot of people and had a lot of really amazing experiences where I started to understand kind of the significance that this race has, not only to IndyCar and IndyCar fans, but really to American motor racing enthusiasts in general. Like it played a huge role not only in motorsports development, but really just automotive development in the U.S. For decades. So for me now, every year that goes by that I don't win, the appreciation and desire to win it kind of ramps up even more. And I think you saw that in 2019. There's so many factors that have to fall into place for you to win that race. I felt that in 2019 I had the car to win. we were in a position with, half of the race gone to kind of, fight for it at the end. And then to have something that was, out of our control, really with a mechanical pit stop issue, to have it taken away from you, or seemingly taken away from you, there was a lot of emotions that kind of came to the forefront. And I think what people appreciated was that was the emotion that maybe they were looking for in 2016, but because I didn't really understand it all that well at that point, I didn't have that. So I think more than the passes, more than the fact that we finished second, it was people saw in that kind of 10-minute time period how much this race meant to me and how badly I wanted to win it. And, last year was another race that got taken away from us in pit lane. So pit lane seems to be the bane of our existence there. So hopefully, this year, we always seem to have a good car. We're always kind of in the top five, at half distance. So, hopefully we can have the car to do that again this year and finally bring it home for number 2.
I think, my advice to you would be just stay out of the pits entirely, and I'll give you that advice for free.
Well, so that's the thing. That's what we did in 2016, which is why it's so wild to me. Like, in 17, in 18, well, really 17, 18, 19, 20, I really thought I had one of at least 2 cars, maybe 3 cars to win the race, and I never did. Whereas in 16, I didn't have the car to win the race. I had the car to finish like 7th or 8th, but I did win because we had pit stop problems, and we actually decided that we didn't want to pit, so we're just going to avoid that, and we skipped a pit stop, and that ended up being the right strategy. So it's, the whole kind of cliche phrase that the speedway chooses the winner. I have a lot of, I believe in that a lot, because I've had the car to do it, I think, at least 3 of the past 4 years and haven't done it. Whereas in 16, kind of fell into my lap. So it's a weird little race like that.
Yeah, totally. So moving now forward again to 2020, which was, it goes without saying, obviously, just an insane, challenging year for most Americans. But then for you, it was a little bit more of a challenging season professionally. And you did an interview with our editor-at-large, Travis Sikulski. I think this was a couple years ago, where you talked about bringing in a sports psychologist to focus on kind of the mental aspect of your racing. Did that make the challenges in 2020 any easier for you? Is that something you're still trying to kind of sharpen moving forward?
Yes, I still use all the techniques that I kind of learned through a 2-year period with Dawn, who's my sports psychologist in England. It did not really make 2020 any easier, I don't think. But ultimately, the way I look at it is, there were things that were out of our control for sure, but there were also things that were in our control that we still screwed up. So you can't blame the whole year on bad luck. I think that's a little unfair to luck itself. We didn't execute. We didn't do a good enough job, and I think some of that was due to the fact that the way that we kind of progressed through race weekends, our strength was really never rolling off the truck strong and then, being able to just go and qualify. Like, we were always kind of the car that would come good Saturday morning in final practice before qualifying. And then, our race weekend would be pretty straightforward because, we qualify in the top 6 and then be able to try and engineer our way to a win from there. Whereas with the kind of changing schedules that we had and just trying to get races in as short a period of time as possible, we only had sometimes a 45-minute or an hour-long practice session, and then it was straight into qualifying, straight into the race all on the same day. And quite frankly, that was not our strong suit. So it took us really the entire year to kind of get better at our offline development, get stronger when we would hit the track for the first time, kind of stay away from science experiments, if you will, and just focus on what we knew in order to make the car go quick. So I think that really got good at the end of the year, and we were in a position to win the season finale pretty easily, and then I just screwed that one up. So it was everything that could go wrong, from driver error to mechanical failures to crashing to getting taken out to undeserved penalties, we had them all last year. So it was just one of those years. And ultimately, when you look at what happened outside of motorsports, it's small potatoes, and you got to keep that in perspective a little bit. But that being said, can't wait to get started on 21. We're testing the IndyCar in 5 days here, and we plan on going for the championship.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the great thing, right? Is the calendar turns over, you get a new season to ply your trade and improve the car and improve the team and improve yourself. So, what are you looking forward to for this new season personally? And what do you think the fans should be looking for? What are the kind of narratives you see from the inside that maybe we can watch for on TV, since we can't make it out to the races?
Sure. So I think so with this picture up, so this is the 4-driver lineup for 24 Hours of Daytona with Wayne Taylor Racing in the Acura DPI car, and this isn't a very exciting thing for us. So myself, Ricky Taylor, who's next to me, and Elio Castroneves, who doesn't need much of an introduction, we were the 3 drivers on the 7 car for Acura Team Penske the past 3 years. So for us to be able to keep that continuity intact and bring a new car and manufacturer to Wayne Taylor Racing, which has won 3 of the past 24 Hours of Daytona, and bring in Philippe Albuquerque, who's been hugely successful in not only American sports car racing, but European sports car racing as well. We kind of have a dream team lineup in a lot of ways in the 10 car now. So that's going to be a whole new challenge for us to try and for a driver, it's rare that you have the opportunity to get the team up to speed on a race car. Usually it's the other way around. So, there's a lot of pressure on the 3 of us to kind of bring all of our knowledge and impart it in as quickly and concisely as possible. Because the competition to win 24 Hours of Daytona is incredibly tough. I mean, I'd say it's almost as hard, if not harder, to win that race than is an Indy 500, just because, you think about the amount of variables that happen over 500 miles. Well, that's a 3-hour race. So multiply that by 8, and it's a whole different ball game. So that's kind of on the immediate forefront of what's coming up. So I'm excited about that. And then in terms of IndyCar, there's, just because it was such a short off season, there's not really any changes. So we obviously had the introduction of the aero screen last year, which was a curveball for all of us, I think, in the beginning. But I think Andretti Autosport in general, the 27 car, the 88 car, my teammate Colton Herta, we went on a stretch of kind of 5 podiums in a row to finish out the season at 3 different tracks. So, I have a lot of high expectations for what we can accomplish. I think the team found a lot of kind of good rhythm and good momentum. And again, continuity is staying the same. So same drivers, same crew members, same engineers on my car, same strategists. So really it's about picking up where we left off in 2020, which, barring one incident, was a really strong end to the season. So I'm looking forward to that. And then obviously very much looking forward to getting back to St. Pete and winning that race to erase what happened back in October.
Absolutely, and we wish you luck on that one. We'll just switch over here. We've got just a few minutes left with Alex for right now, and we've got a few reader questions. Here's one. You're one of the few Americans who's raced in Formula One. Did Mario ever give you any advice, and what was it?
So Mario's given me lots of advice. Not when I raced in Europe, but when I got to know him driving for Andretti Autosport. But the one piece of advice that really stands out to me was before Fast Friday in 2016. So Fast Friday is when they turn the boost up to qualifying levels for the first time, and the lap speed goes up kind of 7 or 8 miles an hour average, and you're going over 230 average for the first time. And I was like, man, 224 is pretty quick. I don't really know how comfortable I am with an extra 7 miles an hour. And he was like, well, with 7 miles an hour faster, you have more downforce too. And I was like, well, I don't know that it works that way, but I'm going to trust what you're saying because you're Mario Andretti. And sure enough, it was no big deal. So that's one that stuck with me for a really long time. And now, instead of Fast Friday being a dreaded a dreaded day of fear. I can't wait for it, and it's my favorite day of the year.
That's great. Another reader question. You said you're not really a car collector, but if you did have to start a collection, what's the first car in that collection for you?
911 Turbo S, I think. I don't think I know. Like, I think I want to buy one. I just, yeah, I don't know yet. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. Let me win a championship first.
That sounds great. Well, thanks again, man, for joining us. Just some housekeeping notes for those who did tune in. Please make sure you visit Road and Track's shop at shop.roadandtrack.com. We got a lot of cool gear in there for you guys. Also check out experiences.roadandtrack.com. We've got a really great lineup of events for our members next year, including a rally in Austin, international adventures to Italy and Japan, and then the annual Hudson Quattrocento. If you've got a little one in your life somewhere, maybe even a couple dogs, sign them up for the Kids Club R&T Crew. This will be a monthly subscription box that's packed full of gear, games, activities, and a new issue of the magazine. And then make sure you turn into some of our upcoming events, our live calls like this. Car and Driver editors are taking our Track Club members behind the scenes of their annual Lightning Lap testing on Thursday, February 4th at 6. And then our next Inside Track will have Deputy Editor Bob Sorakonich, sitting down with Klaus Boos of FCA Europe's design department. Thank you again to all our Track Club members. And thank you, Alex. And remember that immediately following this, for all the Track Club members, we're going to have a more personal Zoom interview with Alex. We'll get to talk a little bit more about the bourbon infatuation, probably. And you guys will be able to have a little bit more of a direct voice in the interview. So yeah, one last time, thanks, Alex, for joining us. And we'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.